Tonight, we begin beneath a humid equatorial sky where the river bends lazily around a city called Brazzaville, its water shimmering under moonlight that spills like liquid silver. You feel the heavy air stick to your skin, and somewhere a drumbeat thuds softly, a heartbeat of a land that has long lived under someone else's rule. Before we dive deeper, here's a quick whisper in your ear. Before we begin, if this little corner of calm has brought you any comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe only if it feels genuine to you. No pressure. I'd also love to hear from you. Just drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always special to know we're all quietly gathered here from different corners of the world like a family, scattered but still connected. All right? Now go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or a soft hum in the background, something that feels like home. Nestle in, get cozy, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You step back in time to the late 19th century when French explorers followed the river, setting up trading posts that soon became symbols of control. At first, it feels almost quiet, almost benign, traders exchanging goods, local chiefs negotiating alliances. But behind those handshakes lurk contracts full of European fine print, the kind that turns partnership into ownership. The French carved this land into their colonial domain, naming it Middle Congo and making Brazzaville their administrative jewel. You see French officials in starched white suits, sipping coffee while scribbling decrees that ripple across villages hundreds of miles away. They imagine themselves as bringers of civilization, yet the locals already have civilizations. Thank you very much, ones rooted in centuries of trade, kinship, and spiritual rhythm. As you wander the villages, you hear old stories whispered by elders around fires. They speak of how the French introduced cash crops, how forests once free to roam became guarded by colonial soldiers. You see rubber trees oozing sap, the lifeblood of a new global economy. The demand for rubber skyrockets with European industrialization, and suddenly this sticky white substance is worth more than the people's comfort or safety. Men are forced to harvest it in staggering quantities, and yes, you've guessed it, whips often do the convincing when words fail. Historians still argue whether the worst atrocities of forced labor here matched those of the notorious Congo Free State under King Leopold II just across the river, but they agree the suffering left deep scars. You feel those scars as you tread along the cracked earth of old labor camps. Workers toiled under the equatorial sun, often unpaid, often beaten all to feed the profits of faraway cities that barely knew they existed. Some tried to flee, hiding in the thick rainforest, but patrols hunted them like ghosts. Even the local chiefs who once had power saw it crumble as colonial administrators dismantled traditional authority and replaced it with a system loyal only to Paris. It's the classic colonial playbook, and you can almost hear the creak of its pages turning. Yet, amid the oppression, culture refuses to die quietly. You pass markets alive with laughter dance and the spicy scent of grilled fish. The people still sing their songs, tell their tales, and perhaps most dangerously remember who they are. In Brazzaville, a city that's slowly modernizing, small groups begin to form church congregations that double as spaces for sharing grievances, schools where French language lessons inadvertently create a generation able to debate colonial policy using the colonizers' own words. Isn't that deliciously ironic? One evening, you watch a Catholic priest teaching young boys to read under a flickering oil lamp. Among them are minds that will grow to question why the French preach equality in their sermons, but deny it in their laws. These students will later become clerks, unionists, and politicians, the future spark to a growing fire. Meanwhile, across the river, Leopoldville, now Kinshasa under Belgian rule, groans under even harsher exploitation. The two sides of the river watch each other like siblings under different cruel guardians, sometimes envying, sometimes pitying. By the early 20th century, railways snake through the land, cutting paths through forests and hills. You walk beside the tracks and hear the clang of hammers, the hiss of steam. These rails, like veins, pump wealth out to the coast while draining the lifeblood of those who built them. One quirky fact: workers often used palm wine to soothe their aching muscles and spirits, sometimes drinking so much that French foremen banned it, fearing unproductivity. The workers, being far cleverer than the foreman gave them credit for, just hid their brews better. As you stroll through Brazzaville in the 1920s, you notice the city is changing. Cafes pop up, jazz music drifts from gramophones, and a tiny middle class of educated Congolese emerges. They wear suits, read newspapers, and quietly question their place in this French world order. The colonial officials sip their wine and assure each other that these Africans are loyal, even as they write secret reports about growing discontent. Historians still argue whether this intellectual class was nurtured deliberately or accidentally by French policy, but either way, the seeds of nationalism are sown. The years march on, and with them so do you. Every step you take reveals the tension coiling tighter like a drum waiting to be struck. Tonight you sense that drumbeat growing louder, and soon it will not just be the rhythm of a song, but the march of change itself. The colonial Congo's uneasy dawn is brightening, and you can almost taste the electricity in the air. Sleepy maybe, but stay with me, because the night is just beginning and history is about to wake up. You move with the morning fog as Brazzaville stretches awake, its streets already buzzing with the footsteps of traders, clerks, and market women balancing baskets on their heads. The year is the early 1940s, and the city hums like an overworked engine, half colonial order, half African vitality. You pass a French officer, adjusting his kepi barking orders in clipped tones, while just behind him 2 Congolese men exchange glances that say, without words, one day this will change. That day isn't here yet, but the whispers are growing louder. They ride on the back of every tram, they echo in the corners of every bar, they even sneak into church sermons when the priest lets a sentence slip about justice. You feel it in the air, a restlessness that tastes like the moment before a storm. World War II, that colossal drama unfolding far away, pulls Brazzaville into its orbit. France, occupied by Germany, splits between Vichy loyalists and the Free French forces under Charles de Gaulle. Here in the Congo, Brazzaville becomes a rallying point for Free France, a loyal outpost that keeps the tricolour flying while Paris lies under Nazi control. Suddenly this small city becomes politically significant, a safe seat for a government in exile. You hear the speeches, feel the urgency. African soldiers are recruited, trained, and shipped off to fight in distant battles, their courage often overlooked by the very men they are dying to protect. There's a strange irony here. Locals fight for a freedom in Europe they do not enjoy at home. You follow a convoy of African troops marching past cheering crowds, their boots thudding on the cobblestones. The pride in their eyes is mixed with a question they cannot yet voice. Will our sacrifices matter when the war is over? Historians still argue whether the promises made to these soldiers were sincere or just convenient propaganda, but what's clear is that something shifts inside them. They return not only with medals, but with a new sense of entitlement to rights long denied. And perhaps more importantly, they return with stories of other nations, other systems, other ways of living, where they weren't treated as second class. As you drift through the markets, you overhear conversations bubbling with excitement. Some talk of how de Gaulle, grateful for their loyalty, might finally reward them with reforms. Others scoff, predicting the French will cling to power no matter what. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation. A quirky fact slips your way. In 1941, Brazzaville's bakers began naming their bread galls to show loyalty to the Free French. Nothing like patriotism you can chew on. The city bakes with hope, even if that hope is half blind. Then comes 1944, and you find yourself brushing shoulders with delegates at the Brazzaville Conference. This grand gathering, hosted right here, gathers colonial administrators, generals, and African notables to discuss the future of France's African territories. You might think, finally, independence talks. Not quite. De Gaulle delivers speeches dripping with praise for Africa's contributions, yet he firmly declares that independence is off the table. Instead, he offers reforms, more local councils, the abolition of forced labor, and the promise of greater rights. It's a bittersweet melody, sweet because some chains loosen, bitter because the cage still stands. The conference fuels two fires at once, gratitude among some, frustration among many. Walking back through the streets after the conference, you notice the conversations turning sharper. Young clerks debate politics in smoky bars, union leaders murmur about strikes, church leaders weave subtle critiques into their sermons. The city's pulse quickens. France hopes its reforms will calm the colonies, but instead they act like fertilizer to a growing nationalist tree. And as with any tree, the roots run deep. You wander into a classroom where a teacher lectures in French, pointing at a chalkboard map of Africa. The students listen politely, but their minds wander. Some are already dreaming of a map where their country is no longer shaded the color of someone else's empire. One boy doodles a flag in the corner of his notebook. His teacher scolds him, but you smile because you know that tiny sketch is history waiting to happen. Meanwhile, Brazzaville's nightlife offers a lighter side. Dance halls sway to Congolese rumba, a music style blending African rhythms with Cuban melodies, filling the air with a sound as rebellious as it is joyful. The colonials sip wine, tapping their feet without realizing they're grooving to the soundtrack of their own fading power. That's the thing about music, it sneaks past the guards and plants ideas you can't quite erase. By the late 1940s, the city is alive with contradictions. French flags still fly, but Congolese voices grow louder. A union strike here, a student protest there. Small tremors that hint at bigger quakes to come. The colonial administration tries to tighten control, but every attempt seems to backfire, only hardening the resolve of those they wish to silence. You stand on a hill overlooking Brazzaville at sunset, the sky bleeding into oranges and purples, and you can feel the change humming beneath the surface. The restlessness is no longer just whispers, it's a song building to its chorus, and soon no one will be able to ignore the tune. You wake to the calls of birds that seem louder than yesterday, as if even they sense the tension building in the air. The mist clings to the leaves as you make your way deeper into the countryside, following paths worn by countless bare feet and scattered with fallen rubber seeds. These trails lead you not only to the villages but to the memories etched into every tree trunk. You brush your fingers against the bark of a rubber tree, feeling the scars where sap once flowed. Scars carved not by nature but by the harsh orders of colonial overseers. In the early decades of the 20th century, forced labor is the law of the land, an ugly truth dressed up in the polite language of obligation. The French decree that every able-bodied man owes labor to the state building roads, harvesting rubber-cutting timber, or constructing the railway that slices through the forest like a wound. You picture men carrying heavy loads under the punishing sun, their shoulders raw, their breaths shallow. Each day feels endless, and the pay often non-existent. Those who falter risk beatings or imprisonment. Historians still argue whether these policies were as brutal as the neighboring Belgian Congo's infamous rubber terror, but no one denies they were cruel enough to break bodies and spirits. The Congo Ocean Railway becomes a symbol of both progress and suffering. You trace its steel tracks with your gaze, knowing they cost tens of thousands of lives to build. Workers die from exhaustion, malnutrition, and disease, their graves hidden beneath the green canopy. The French celebrate the railway as an engineering triumph. The locals remember it as a graveyard with tracks running through it. There's a grim joke among them that the railway is held up by bones, a joke so sharp it cuts. You wander into a riverside village where the smell of wood smoke hangs heavy. Old men sit under a tree, their eyes clouded but still burning with memory. They tell stories of hiding in the forest to escape labor recruiters, of women smuggling food to husbands forced to work miles away. One elder laughs bitterly, telling you how some workers smeared themselves with mud and pretended to be sick to avoid the quotas. This isn't just survival, it's resistance in small, defiant doses. Quirky as it may sound, some even faked being possessed by spirits because colonial overseers were oddly hesitant to mess with witchcraft. Fear works both ways. The French, of course, call this system necessary. They speak of development of railways and bridges, of how these projects will modernize the colony. But modernization built on suffering is a shaky foundation. You feel it in the air, that sense of something simmering just beneath the surface. Even those who comply grow resentful, and resentment, like a seed, grows quietly until one day it bursts through the soil. By the 1930s, the world's eyes occasionally glance at this part of Africa, but not enough to stop the abuses. Reports leak, missionaries write letters, and a few humanitarians in Europe raise eyebrows, yet the system trudges on. But every report, every whispered story chips away at the colonial facade. Change doesn't come overnight. It creeps like the slow advance of dawn. Back in Brazzaville, workers begin organizing in hushed tones. You see groups meeting in church basements discussing wages conditions and their right to be treated as humans, not tools. Even the colonial authorities start to feel the pressure. They reduce some quotas, tweak some laws, but these are bandages on a deep wound. The railway remains, the plantations remain, and the memories of suffering remain most of all. Then something unexpected stirs the pot: the growing urban population. Many leave the villages tired of forced labor in the fields and head to the city in search of jobs. The colonial government thinks this urban migration will weaken resistance by scattering it, but instead it concentrates the anger. In Brazzaville's crowded neighborhoods, workers share stories, organize strikes, and nurture the early flames of unionism. It's in these cramped rooms that the seeds of political consciousness sprout. One evening, you watch a group of workers sitting around a flickering lantern. One man, clutching a tattered newspaper, reads aloud an article about labor movements in other parts of Africa. His voice trembles not from fear, but from excitement. The others nod, some smile, and you can almost hear their thoughts. If they can fight, so can we. Historians still debate whether these early gatherings were primarily about labor or already tinged with nationalism, but honestly, does it matter? The two causes are about to merge like rivers joining in a flood. And amidst all this heaviness, life continues. Children play barefoot in the dust, women laugh as they cook, and musicians pluck guitars, turning grief into song. The rhythms of Congolese rumba swell through the night, mingling joy with resistance. It's almost funny, music meant for dancing also becomes a soundtrack for defiance. Colonial authorities tap their feet, oblivious to the fact that the beat they enjoy carries the pulse of a revolution. The forced labor system, once the backbone of colonial control, is slowly cracking. Each crack is small, an escape, a strike, a whispered complaint, but together they form a fracture too wide to ignore. You can sense the shift as you walk back along the railway tracks under a moonlit sky. The same steel that once symbolized oppression now glistens with the faint promise that one day those rails might carry freedom instead of chains. You take a deep breath. The air smells of wet earth and coming rain. Somewhere, a drum begins to play, soft and steady. The storm is still distant, but you know it's on its way. You step back into Brazzaville just as the 1940s melt into the 1950s, and the city feels different now, busier, louder, as if the ground itself hums with unspoken plans. The streets smell of roasted peanuts and diesel fumes, markets overflow with chatter, and cafes brim with cigarette smoke curling above whispered debates. You duck into one of these cafes, a small place with creaky wooden chairs and a radio hissing out French chansons. At a corner table, young Congolese men in neatly pressed shirts lean close, their voices low, speaking of words that feel dangerous: liberty, equality, independence. You sip the air thick with tension and hope and realize you're watching history hatch in real time. This is where intellectual sparks flare. A new generation, students, teachers, clerks, has emerged, educated enough to read French law and bold enough to challenge it. They form discussion circles, literary clubs, and underground groups that French authorities dismiss as harmless at first. But ideas like fire spread quietly until they burn. These young minds write articles in local papers, question the fairness of colonial policies, and dream out loud about a Congo not ruled from Paris. It's almost funny, the very schools the French built to civilize now produce the voices calling for decolonization. Talk about a plan backfiring. You walk along a narrow street where chalkboards outside shops advertise in both French and Lingala. Here, in classrooms tucked behind crumbling walls, teachers tell students about European philosophers and African history, in the same breath sparking pride in a past the colonizers tried to erase. Historians still argue whether these intellectuals were more influenced by French Republican ideals or by Pan-Africanism sweeping the continent, but the answer feels obvious. They took from both, blending them into a vision uniquely their own. Outside the city, in rural areas, chiefs and elders also adapt. Some work with the French, trying to protect their people within the system. Others quietly resist, offering sanctuary to those fleeing unfair taxes or labor demands. You hear of clandestine meetings under moonlight where elders bless the young who leave for Brazzaville to study, hoping they'll return with ideas sharp enough to cut through colonial chains. Names begin to surface, figures who will later become etched into Congo's story. You overhear the name Fulbert Yulu, a charismatic priest who blends spiritual authority with political ambition. Then there's Jacques Opongo, a fiery leader with roots in the trade union movement, ready to challenge anyone who stands in his way. At this stage, they're just rising stars, but even now you can feel their gravity pulling people into orbit. One evening, you slip into a crowded hall where a debate is underway. The topic: whether independence should be immediate or gradual. Voices rise, hands wave, and the crowd murmurs with energy. A young man argues passionately, his words like arrows. "We've given our sweat, our blood. Why wait?" Across the room, another warns. "Without preparation, we'll trade one chaos for another." The debate ends without resolution, but the air crackles. This is not the quiet Congo of decades past. This is a nation learning to speak its own mind. While the city brews with ideas, the colonial authorities grow nervous. They tighten censorship, keep spies in cafes, and arrest outspoken activists. But repression only makes the fire burn hotter. Quirky as it sounds, some activists smuggle pamphlets inside loaves of bread, passing ideas hand to hand under the noses of policemen too busy checking for contraband alcohol to notice. You chuckle at the ingenuity. It's proof that even under pressure, creativity flourishes. The French, sensing they can't rely on force alone, try to co-opt the rising elite. They offer them minor positions in councils, a taste of power to keep them loyal. Some accept, believing they can reform the system from within. Others reject these crumbs, demanding the whole loaf. This tension between collaboration and resistance becomes a dance, one step forward, two steps back. In the streets, workers continue to organize strikes, sometimes over wages, sometimes over dignity itself. These strikes often spill into the political sphere, linking labor struggles to the larger fight for independence. You watch as crowds march with homemade signs, their chants echoing through Brazzaville. The police show up, batons in hand, but each protest leaves a mark. Even when crushed, the memory lingers, and memories are powerful fuel. At night, you stand on the balcony of a modest house where leaders meet in secret. They sit on rickety chairs, papers scattered across the table, voices hushed but intense. Plans form here, alliances, manifestos, the blueprints for a future free of colonial rule. Some of these men will become heroes, others will fall from grace. But tonight, they are united by a dream bigger than themselves. And amid the plotting and debating, life goes on. You see couples dancing in dimly lit clubs, children chasing each other through dusty alleys, and street vendors laughing as they sell roasted corn. The ordinary persists even as the extraordinary brews, a reminder that revolutions aren't just grand speeches, they're built in the quiet spaces of daily life. By the mid-1950s, Brazzaville feels like a city perched on the edge of something monumental. The intellectuals keep writing, the unions keep pushing, and the political leaders keep rising. The French hold on, but their grip slips a little more each year. As you walk home under a sky splashed with stars, you hear a lone guitarist playing a melancholic tune. The notes float into the night, carrying both the weight of the past and the fragile hope of the future. You close your eyes and listen, knowing that the sparks you've seen tonight will soon ignite a flame no one can put out. You find yourself drifting back into Brazzaville in early 1944, where the city wears a rare air of importance. Streets are swept cleaner, flags hang brighter, and soldiers stand straighter, for this is the year the French government in exile calls an international gathering in its African stronghold. You blend into the crowd as trucks rumble past, carrying delegates in crisp uniforms and tailored suits, to the meeting that history will remember as the Brazzaville Conference. The French want to show they value their colonies, but as you watch the guests descend, you can't help noticing the stark contrast. The white delegates step confidently into grand halls, while the African representatives, few and carefully chosen, wait at the edges, their voices hushed by design. Inside, under high ceilings and the glow of chandeliers, General Charles de Gaulle delivers a speech that rings with gratitude for Africa's wartime loyalty. He praises the soldiers who fought bravely for France in faraway lands, acknowledging the blood they spilled. You feel the pride swell in the African listeners, only to have it cut short by the next words. De Gaulle speaks firmly, there will be no independence. Instead, he promises reforms, abolition of forced labor, more local councils, and a new status for colonies as part of a greater French union. It's the classic colonial carrot and stick. They give just enough to quiet dissent without loosening their grip. Historians still argue whether this conference was a sincere attempt at progress or merely a strategy to maintain control. Whatever the truth, the promises hang in the air like smoke, visible, fragrant, and quick to dissipate. After the speeches, you drift into the streets where the people talk in circles. Some are hopeful. At least they ended forced labor, they murmur. Others laugh bitterly, saying, the French changed the words, not the chains. You can almost hear the crackle of these conversations sparking something deeper. The conference plants two seeds, hope and skepticism. Both will grow. As the reforms roll out, life in the colony shifts ever so slightly. Forced labor is officially abolished, though in practice many workers still face coercion under new names. Local councils are established, giving a handful of Congolese men small roles in governance. You watch one of these councils in session. African representatives in suits sit at a table with French officials, their voices polite, but their eyes sharp. It's a step forward, yet the French retain the final say, ensuring the leash remains tight. You can't help but smirk at the irony. They invite Africans to participate, then remind them who's in charge every time they speak too boldly. Outside the official halls, unions grow bolder. Workers demand fair wages, better conditions, and respect. In 1945, as the world celebrates the end of World War II, Congolese veterans return home, expecting the freedom they fought for. Instead, they find the same old hierarchy waiting. You see their frustration boiling over. These are men who've seen Europe, who've fought Nazis, who know the hypocrisy of a France preaching liberty while denying it here. Their resentment seeps into the streets, into the union halls, into every corner of the city. One night, you slip into a smoky bar where veterans gather. They drink palm wine and swap war stories, their laughter mixing with sighs. One veteran taps his medal and says, "They gave me this, but not my rights." The others nod. This bar, like many, becomes more than a place to drink. It's a breeding ground for new ideas. And ideas once spoken are hard to silence. The intellectuals of Brazzaville, emboldened by the reform's gaps, step up their activism. They organize debates, publish newsletters, and push for more than crumbs. Some quote the French Revolution's ideals back at the colonizers, a cheeky reminder that liberté, égalité, fraternité shouldn't be selective. Quirky tidbit. One underground group names itself after a local bird, the nganga, because, like the bird, they say their ideas will fly over fences no matter how high. Meanwhile, the French administration walks a tightrope. They know they must adapt, but every concession feels like an admission of weakness. They increase police surveillance, censor radical writings, and occasionally arrest activists to scare the rest. But fear loses its power when too many people stop being afraid. Each arrest becomes a rallying cry, each silenced voice an echo louder than before. In the countryside, villagers hear these stories through traveling traders and returning workers. Even in places untouched by politics, people begin to wonder if the French can make some concessions, why not more? The desire for change spreads like a rumor, quiet, persistent, impossible to stamp out. You walk along a dirt path, listening to women pounding cassava, their songs now laced with subtle lyrics about freedom. Music, as always, says what words cannot. By the late 1940s, the reforms of the Brazzaville Conference have lost their shine. They were never meant to lead to independence, but instead they inadvertently created a space where independence could be imagined. You stand on a balcony at dusk watching Brazzaville's lights flicker on one by one. Below, a small group gathers in the shadows, speaking in low tones. Their plan is still fragile, their dreams still fragile, yet it glows all the same. You feel the night breeze carry the scent of wood smoke, and something else change. The conference meant to keep the colony in line has instead taught it how to question the line altogether. You step into Brazzaville's industrial heart as the 1950s pick up speed, and the air is thick with the metallic clatter of tools against iron. Workers in worn shirts and dusty trousers move like a tide through factory gates, their faces set with quiet determination. You watch as one man wipes sweat from his brow and mutters to a co-worker, "Enough is enough." That phrase hums through the city's workshops, docks and construction sites, a low drumbeat that only grows louder. The unions, once timid, now flex their muscles in the open. They are no longer just about better pay. They have become engines of liberation, and you can almost hear their gears turning. The trade unions, built from the solidarity of workers across industries, organize strikes with precision. You follow them as they march through narrow streets, their footsteps pounding like a heartbeat. Their banners, though simple, flutter proudly against the colonial sky. French authorities frown, dispatching police to shadow them, but the workers' numbers swell, and with them their courage. One mainstream fact stands clear: by the mid-1950s, these unions had become some of the most powerful voices against colonial injustices, linking everyday labor struggles to the grander vision of independence. You sense the connection: freedom at work, freedom at home, freedom everywhere. Strikes ripple across Brazzaville like waves. In 1956, dockworkers stop unloading ships, halting the flow of goods and frustrating the colonial economy. Elsewhere, railway workers lay down their tools, their silence louder than any protest chant. You watch French administrators scrambling, sending negotiators to calm things down, offering concessions they once swore they'd never give. Each strike wins small victories: better pay here, safer conditions there. But more importantly, each one teaches the workers that together they can bend the system. Historians still argue whether these strikes were primarily economic or fundamentally political. But in the eyes of those marching, the two are inseparable. In the city's alleys, you overhear union leaders strategizing in whispers. They gather in hidden rooms, plans scribbled on scraps of paper, passing news from one neighborhood to another. A quirky tidbit catches your ear to avoid police raids. Some meetings disguise themselves as choir rehearsals. Picture it: workers singing hymns with angelic faces while plotting a protest between verses. Even the colonial spies might have tapped their feet to the music, none the wiser. The union's actions stir ordinary citizens too. Women join protests, carrying water and food to striking men and sometimes leading chants themselves. Market traders refuse to sell to colonial officials as an act of silent defiance. Children run through the streets, delivering messages, dodging the gendarmes with a mischievous grin. This is not just a labor movement anymore, it's a community rising. You feel it in every handshake, every shared glance, every song humming from open windows. The French authorities, of course, don't sit idle. They respond with crackdowns, arrests, and the occasional violent dispersal. You stand in a square as police charge a crowd, batons swinging, dust and chaos swirling. The workers scatter, but they regroup stronger each time. Fear still lurks in their hearts, but it no longer controls them. Instead, it sharpens their resolve. As one union leader tells his comrades, "If we don't fight, we remain slaves. If we fight, we have a chance." The words hang in the smoky air like a challenge no one dares to ignore. During this time, unions begin aligning with political movements, intertwining their fates. Figures like Jacques Opongo, rooted in union activism, rise as prominent political leaders. They give fiery speeches that electrify crowds, calling for an end to colonial exploitation and the dawn of self-rule. You watch the faces in those crowds, some hopeful, some skeptical, but all listening intently. Even Fulbert Yulu, the priest-turned-politician, learns to harness union energy for his ambitions. The workers' voices, once scattered, now echo in parliament halls and political rallies alike. You wander through Brazzaville at night, where lanterns glow in tight alleyways and the scent of grilled fish mixes with cigarette smoke. Groups of men huddle around radios, listening to news from other African countries, Morocco, Tunisia, Ghana, places where independence is no longer just a dream, but a reality. Their eyes gleam as they whisper, "If they can do it, why not us?" The idea spreads faster than the colonial authorities can control, feeding a fire already raging beneath their feet. And it's not just politics, it's culture too. Musicians weave messages of resistance into their songs, artists paint murals that hint at freedom, and even fashion becomes a statement. Men trade stiff European suits for traditional fabrics, at rallies a subtle nod to identity reclaimed. You chuckle when you notice one protester wearing both a suit jacket over a patterned wrap, as if saying, "We'll use your tools until we don't have to." By the late 1950s, the colonial administration senses the tide turning. They attempt to appease the masses with new reforms, expanding local governance and loosening some restrictions. But it's too little too late. The workers have tasted their power and they won't let go. You stand on a rooftop overlooking Brazzaville as dusk falls, the city alive with murmurs and distant drumming. Somewhere below, unionists plan their next move. Somewhere else, politicians sharpen their rhetoric. The air feels thick, ready to crack open. As you breathe in the humid night, you realize the unions have done more than fight for wages. They've built the foundation of a national movement. Their strikes have shaken the economy, their chants have shaken the streets, and soon their demands will shake colonial rule itself. The drumbeat grows louder, steady and unrelenting, guiding the city toward a dawn it's been waiting for far too long. The night air clings to your skin as you weave through the winding streets of Brazzaville, where every corner hums with political gossip. By the late 1950s, the union-driven fire has spilled into a new arena politics. You can feel the shift posters pasted on walls, names whispered in excitement, and gatherings where arguments flare and alliances form under the dim light of kerosene lamps. The Republic of Congo is no longer just dreaming of independence. It's wrestling over what that independence should look like and who should lead it. Out of this ferment rise two names that dominate every conversation: Fulbert Yulu and Jacques Opango. Yulu, the priest who traded his cassock for a politician's suit, is charismatic, charming, and skilled at winning hearts. His sermons, turned speeches, mix moral authority with political savvy, drawing crowds who see in him both a leader and a symbol of national pride. Opposite him stands Opango, a fiery unionist whose working-class roots and militant style make him a favorite of the laborers. Their rivalry is like a tug-of-war pulling the growing nationalist movement in two directions. Historians still argue whether their conflict strengthened the independence struggle by fueling debate or weakened it by dividing forces, but either way, it shaped the path ahead. You walk into a political rally in a dusty, open square. The crowd sways with anticipation as Yulu steps onto a wooden platform, his voice rising above the chatter. He speaks of freedom, unity, and the dignity of the Congolese people, his words flowing like a river. The crowd roars and you feel the vibration in your chest. But not far away, Opango is holding his own rally, promising justice for workers and warning against opportunists who might replace colonial chains with their own. His supporters chant his name like a drumbeat. Two visions of independence, two leaders climbing the same ladder but reaching for different rungs. The French watch these developments, nervously playing their own game of influence. They try to manipulate alliances, offering subtle support to candidates they find manageable while undermining those they fear. You notice French officials sipping wine on balconies, their polite smiles hiding clenched jaws. They know independence is coming, but they want to ensure it arrives on terms favorable to them. Quirky tidbit. Rumors spread that some colonial administrators placed bets on which leader would win, like independence was a horse race they could gamble on. You almost laugh because the stakes are far greater than any wager. Political parties spring up like wildflowers after rain, each claiming to represent the true voice of the people. Yulu's party, The UDA Democratic Union for the Defense of African Interests courts the urban elite and rural chiefs alike, promising unity. Opangolt's MSA African Socialist Movement draws its strength from unions and workers demanding radical change. Smaller parties orbit around them, forming fragile coalitions that shift with every election. You sit in on a party meeting where leaders argue late into the night, the air thick with cigarette smoke and ambition. Every decision feels like a gamble, every alliance a fragile truce. Elections in this era are messy affairs, voting marred by intimidation, accusations of fraud, and occasional outbreaks of violence. You walk through a polling station where voters line up in the scorching sun, clutching identification papers. Their faces show a mix of hope and fear, as if they know their choices matter, but also know those choices might come at a price. When results are announced, celebrations erupt in some neighborhoods, while others simmer with anger. The rivalry between Yulu and Opangol escalates, sometimes spilling into street clashes between their supporters. The colonial police stand by their presence, a reminder that ultimate power still lies elsewhere for now. In the midst of this turbulence, Pan-African ideas drift into the Congo like a warm breeze. Leaders from across the continent exchange letters and visits, encouraging each other to break free from European rule. News of Ghana's independence in 1957 electrifies the Congolese, proving that colonial empires can crumble. You hear young activists shouting, "If Ghana can do it, so can we." Their voices carry over the Congo River, mingling with the night chorus of crickets and distant drums. Cultural pride surges alongside political activism. Artists paint bold murals of African heroes, writers publish essays on self-determination, and musicians slip nationalist lyrics into their songs. One night, you listen to a guitarist strumming a tune that mixes joy with defiance. The crowd sings along, their voices rising into the humid air. Even when they dance, you can tell they're dancing towards something bigger. As the 1958 French constitutional referendum approaches, tensions tighten. France offers its colonies a choice: remain within the French community with limited autonomy, or reject it and risk immediate independence without support. Political parties split on the issue, debates rage in markets and cafes, and the entire country holds its breath. Yulu campaigns for a yes vote, seeing autonomy as a strategic step toward full independence. Opangol warns that it's just another chain in disguise. You watch rallies swell with energy, each side claiming to hold the key to Congo's future. By now, the French can no longer pretend control is secure. The streets pulse with politics, and the people no longer bow their heads as they once did. Every chant, every speech, every ballot cast chips away at the colonial facade. You stand on a hill overlooking Brazzaville, the river shimmering below like liquid fire. In the distance, you hear both cheers and arguments, a symphony of democracy in its raw, unpolished form. The rivalry between Yulu and Opangol may divide, but it also proves one thing: the Congolese are no longer passive subjects. They are active architects of their destiny. The political storm grows louder each day, and you sense it will soon break into something unstoppable. Independence is no longer a question of if, but of when and how. You take a deep breath, letting the humid night fill your lungs. The city smells of smoke, sweat, and anticipation. Tomorrow the struggle will continue. More debates, more rallies, more hope. The pieces are moving fast now, and the board is almost set for the final game. You step into Brazzaville at the dawn of 1958, and the air itself feels charged, as if every breath carries the weight of history. Posters peel from the walls, slogans shout from every corner, and the faces in the crowd glow with anticipation. France has placed a stark question before its colonies: accept autonomy within the French community, or reject it and plunge headfirst into full independence without the safety net of French support. It's a decision that slices through conversations in bars, whispers in kitchens, and debates in crowded halls. You feel the city tremble beneath the weight of this choice. The referendum becomes the talk of the town. On one side, Fulbert Yulu urges a yes vote. To him, joining the French community is a clever stepping stone, a way to secure more autonomy, while avoiding the chaos that immediate independence might bring. His speeches are calm but persuasive, painting a picture of gradual progress where the Congo builds its strength before cutting the final chord. On the other side, Jacques Opongo warns that saying yes only tightens the leash. His rallies are fiery, demanding full freedom now, not later. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine ideological divide or simply a reflection of personal ambition, but you can feel both men truly believe they hold the key to the future. The streets become battlegrounds of words. You walk through the market as vendors shout political slogans while selling mangoes and children chalk party symbols onto dusty walls. At night, in dimly lit rooms, families argue over dinner, torn between caution and courage. Even churches hum with tension, priests weave politics into sermons, and congregations murmur their own prayers for the nation's fate. A quirky tidbit floats your way in some neighborhoods. People tie colored cloths to their doors to silently signal how they'll vote, turning alleyways into patchwork mosaics of political allegiance. On the day of the vote, the city moves in a solemn rhythm. You join the long line of voters where men and women clutch their papers like fragile treasures. The sun blazes down, but no one leaves the queue. Their faces, etched with both hope and fear, reflect the magnitude of the moment. You notice how French officials watch the proceedings with a nervous stiffness, their pens hovering, as if the ink might run dry under the weight of this choice. When ballots drop into boxes, it's not just paper falling, it's the sound of a colony rewriting its story. The results come quickly. The Republic of Congo votes yes, choosing autonomy within the French community. You hear cheers erupt across Brazzaville, fireworks crackle in the sky, and drums beat deep into the night. Supporters of Yulu celebrate, waving flags and dancing in the streets. Yet, in quieter corners, Opango's supporters gather with solemn faces, muttering that this victory is only a delay of the inevitable. The celebration, though loud, carries an undercurrent of unease. Even as you join the dancing crowds, you sense the unanswered question: is this freedom, or just freedom dressed in French colors? In the months that follow, changes ripple through the country. The new autonomous government begins to form, with Congolese leaders holding real power for the first time, though France still keeps its hand firmly on the tiller. You watch as Yulu, now the clear political star, maneuvers through this new landscape with careful steps, strengthening his party's hold while projecting unity. His charm wins him allies, but his critics whisper that he is too close to the French, too willing to compromise. These whispers, soft now, will grow louder later. The political landscape remains fragile. Old rivalries flare and new alliances form each move, shadowed by the looming promise of full independence. The unions, once the loudest voices in the streets, now find themselves in a strange position. Some support Yulu, believing his path will secure their gains. Others drift toward Opango, still hungry for a complete break. You attend a union meeting where workers argue late into the night, voices rising and falling like a storm. Their debates echo the larger national dilemma: how to balance caution with ambition. Meanwhile, the cultural life of Brazzaville thrives. Music blares from every corner. Rumba, jazz and folk tunes mix in a melting pot of sound. Painters and poets fill their works with symbols of freedom, even when politics seems stuck in half measures. You walk past a mural of a bird breaking from its cage, its wings only partly spread. It's beautiful, but you can't help noticing the bars are still close behind. Across Africa, winds of independence sweep stronger. News arrives of Guinea's bold no vote in the same referendum, choosing immediate independence from France. This decision shocks the colonial world and inspires Congolese activists who watch with a mix of admiration and envy. In Brazzaville's backrooms, debates rage over whether Guinea's path is reckless or heroic. The French, stung by Guinea's defiance, punish it with economic isolation, a move that sends a chilling message to other colonies: think twice before cutting ties completely. The Congo, cautious but watchful, continues on its chosen path, slowly gathering the strength to take the final leap. By late 1959, autonomy feels both empowering and incomplete. The Congolese government governs, but Paris still whispers instructions. The streets, once euphoric, now hum with impatience. Protests flare, sometimes met with police batons, and political meetings crackle with tension. You walk through a square where a young man shouts, "We asked for freedom, not permission." His words hang in the air, bold and unafraid. Even those who supported the referendum begin to agree. Autonomy is only the halfway house to independence, and no one wants to stay there forever. Standing by the Congo River at sunset, you watch the water reflect the fiery sky. Across the river, the Belgian Congo teeters toward its own independence, soon to erupt in chaos. The currents swirl, carrying the weight of two colonies on parallel paths. You breathe in the humid air and realize the Republic of Congo is poised on the edge of something irreversible. The French community was meant to delay the break, but instead it has sharpened the people's hunger for it. The vote of 1958 opened the door, and now the people are ready to walk through, even if the French still try to hold it half shut. The stage is set, the actors are ready, and the next act will not be about half measures. The whisper of independence has become a roar, and you can almost hear it in the river's flow, steady and unstoppable. The time is near when the Republic of Congo will no longer ask, but declare. You return to Brazzaville on a morning unlike any other. July 1st, 1960, the day the Republic of Congo finally steps out from under France's shadow. The streets are alive with sound. Drums beat from every neighborhood, horns blare, and children run barefoot, waving little flags that flutter like bursts of color against the humid sky. The scent of roasted meat mingles with sweat and anticipation, and every face you see radiates pride. This is the day they have dreamed of for decades, the day whispered about in markets and plotted in secret rooms. Now it has arrived. You make your way to the city square where a crowd has gathered, packed, shoulder to shoulder, hearts thudding in unison. On the stage stands Fulbert Yulu, now the nation's first prime minister, wearing a suit that gleams almost as brightly as his smile. Around him, dignitaries from France and other African nations sit stiffly in their seats, fanning themselves against the heat. The French flag, once a symbol of control, is lowered slowly, and for a moment the crowd holds its breath. Then the new Congolese flag rises, its green, yellow and red shining against the sun. The roar that follows is deafening. You feel it vibrating in your bones. Tears streak down the faces of men who once toiled under forced labor, women who kept the flame of resistance alive, and children who will grow up never knowing what it felt like to bow to a foreign ruler. Yulu's voice booms across the square as he declares the Republic of Congo independent. He promises unity, progress, and a future shaped by Congolese hands. His words dance through the air, wrapping around the crowd like a blessing. People cheer, clap, and sing their voices, weaving together into one joyous song. A quirky tidbit slips into your ear. In some neighborhoods, families slaughtered goats and chickens the night before feasting into dawn so they could greet independence with full bellies and full hearts. As the celebrations sweep through the city, you notice a curious mixture of emotions. There is pure euphoria, people dancing in the streets, hugging strangers, pouring palm wine into each other's cups. Musicians set up in corners, guitars and drums filling the air with the rhythms of freedom. Children paint their faces with the colors of the new flag, chasing each other until they collapse in giggles. Yet beneath the joy, a trace of unease lingers. Independence is here. Yes, but the questions remain: what comes next? Can this fragile new nation hold itself together? Historians still argue whether the Congolese truly understood the challenges ahead, or whether they simply chose to celebrate the moment come what may. Perhaps both are true. You drift through the celebrations, soaking in every detail. In the markets, women sell brightly woven fabrics, each pattern telling a story. In cafes, men raise glasses, toasting to a future they can now imagine as their own. At the riverbank, groups gather to sing songs of victory, their voices carrying across the Congo River to Leopoldville, where another independence celebration is brewing in the Belgian Congo. Two nations, two flags, two paths, converging in history. Not everyone celebrates openly. Some French officials retreat into their compounds, watching the festivities from behind curtains, their expressions unreadable. They have lost political control, but they know their economic influence remains strong. Contracts, companies, and agreements still bind the Congo to France in ways not easily broken. You catch a conversation between two French businessmen muttering over wine. "We may have left the palace, but we still hold the keys to the vault." Their words are cold but true, a reminder that colonialism doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers like smoke long after the fire is out. Meanwhile, in the countryside, independence feels both distant and immediate. Villages celebrate with drumming, dancing, and storytelling around fires that crackle late into the night. Elders bless the young, urging them to remember the struggles that won this day. In some places, the news travels slowly, carried by traders and travelers, but when it arrives, it spreads joy like sunlight. You sit under a tree with an old man who smiles softly and says, "We waited so long. Now the waiting is over." As night falls over, Brazzaville fireworks streak across the sky, exploding into colors that mirror the new flag. The crowd gazes upward, faces lit by bursts of light. You feel the collective heartbeat of a nation taking its first steps. Even the moon seems to hang lower, as if curious to watch this moment unfold. Music swells, feet stomp, and voices rise in a chorus that seems to shake the stars. And yet beneath the euphoria, whispers of doubt persist. Some worry about the deep divisions between political factions, the fragile alliances that barely held through independence. Others fear tribal tensions could flare, or that the French will continue to pull strings from afar. These worries don't dull the celebrations tonight, but they linger in the shadows like clouds on the edge of a clear sky. Yulu, smiling for the cameras, surely feels them too. He knows the hardest work is yet to come. As you leave the square, stepping carefully through streams of confetti and discarded bottles, you glance back one last time. The flag flutters proudly in the night breeze. And for now, that is enough. The Republic of Congo is free, standing tall under the stars. Tomorrow will bring its own storms, but tonight belongs to joy. The streets hum with laughter music and the sweet scent of roasted peanuts, and you carry that warmth with you as you walk into the quiet dark, knowing this moment will echo through generations. The first dawn of a fully independent Republic of Congo rises, and you wake to a city bathed in golden light. The streets of Brazzaville, littered with confetti and empty bottles, feel eerily still after the chaos of celebration. Children sleep curled against their mothers. Vendors rest beside unsold goods, and drummers who beat their hands raw last night now lie quietly with their instruments by their side. The silence is almost comforting, yet it carries a weight, an awareness that after the cheers fade, the work of building a nation begins. Fulbert Yulu, now the nation's president, stands at the heart of this new reality. Yesterday, he was a hero bathed in applause. Today, he must govern. You watch him in his office, leaning over papers, his brow furrowed. He has big dreams to modernize the country, to unite its people, to steer it away from French control, while still maintaining crucial ties. But dreams collide with reality quickly. The French may have lowered their flag, but their influence lingers in the economy, the military, and the flow of aid. Historians still argue whether Yulu genuinely sought to reduce French influence or merely worked to consolidate his own power under a friendlier guise. Perhaps it was both. Power is rarely pure. Within weeks, cracks begin to show. The rivalry between Yulu and Opango doesn't vanish with independence. It simmers hotter than ever. Political factions sharpen their knives, old alliances crumble, and rumors of plots swirl like smoke. You wander through the neighborhoods where Opango's supporters gather, their voices hushed but bitter, accusing Yulu of betraying the workers who fought for freedom. Across the city, Yulu's allies speak of the need for strong leadership to protect the fragile state. You feel the tension building like a storm cloud. The first major clash erupts in 1959. Riots between rival political supporters shake Brazzaville to its core. You find yourself in the middle of streets filled with stones, barricades, and tear gas. The joyous dancing of months past is replaced by chaos. Fires burn, crowds scatter, and police forces swing batons to restore order. The violence leaves scars, both physical and emotional, on a city that was still learning how to live with freedom. You walk through the smoke, the air stinging your eyes, and wonder if independence came too quickly or if it simply revealed wounds that were always there. Tribal tensions, once muted under French rule, begin to rise. Ethnic loyalties seep into politics, fracturing national unity. Leaders use these divisions to strengthen their own positions, and the people weary of colonial oppression now find themselves wary of their own rulers. You overhear an elder in a village saying, "We chased away the white masters, but new masters have come from our own soil." His words are heavy, but they ring true in the growing disillusionment. Economically, the new nation stumbles. The French still control much of the trade, and Congo's wealth in timber and minerals flows outward, while the people see little benefit. Projects stall, corruption spreads, and hopes of immediate prosperity fade. Yet amid the hardship, small victories bloom, schools expand, cultural pride flourishes, and voices in literature and music grow louder, painting an identity that no colonial power can erase. In markets, rumba continues to play, defiant and joyful, even when pockets are empty. Internationally, the Republic of Congo steps cautiously into the world. Leaders from other African nations visit, sharing advice and solidarity. Yulu, eager to present a strong face, attends conferences, shaking hands with dignitaries and promising a bright future. But he also courts the French, balancing independence with dependency. Quirky tidbit. At one international event, Yulu proudly wore a robe, blending Congolese patterns with French, tailoring a walking symbol of the tightrope he walked. Some admired it, others mocked it. The tightrope, like the robe, was stitched together but fraying at the edges. As the months stretch into a year, whispers of dissatisfaction grow. Opposition leaders accuse Yulu of authoritarianism, of silencing critics, of bending too easily to French economic demands. In union halls, workers grumble that their struggle has been forgotten. The same unions that once marched with Yulu now begin to murmur against him. Historians still debate whether his policies were necessary pragmatism or early signs of dictatorship, but the effect is the same: hope dims, replaced by cautious doubt. Yet even in the uncertainty, there are moments of beauty. You watch schoolchildren raise the Congolese flag each morning, their voices clear as they sing the anthem. You see farmers in distant villages celebrating the harvest under their own sky, free from colonial taxes. You hear poets recite verses about freedom, love, and the river that flows like a vein through their land. The nation is bruised, but it is breathing on its own. By the end of 1960, the Republic of Congo stands on shaky legs, but it stands nonetheless. You sit by the riverbank at dusk, watching the water ripple with reflections of the city lights. Across the Congo River, in the Belgian Congo, chaos erupts. In the newly named Democratic Republic of Congo, where independence has plunged into turmoil. You glance back at Brazzaville, quieter, but not without its own storms brewing. The two countries mirror each other like twins, one burning, the other smouldering. The first year of independence ends with both pride and worry. You feel the heartbeat of a young nation, fast, uncertain, but alive. The joy of July still glows in memories, but reality has sharpened its edges. The Republic of Congo has stepped into the world, and now it must learn to walk without falling. You breathe in the humid night, the air thick with the scent of earth after rain. The sky is dark, the stars are faint, yet somewhere above the clouds the moon still shines. The dream of independence remains, even if the path is rough. And as the city sleeps, drums echo faintly from the distance, steady and soft, a reminder that no matter how uncertain tomorrow may be, the spirit of freedom beats on. The drums fade, and so does the rush of history. You feel yourself slowing, your thoughts quieting, as if the story itself is tucking you in. The Republic of Congo's journey from colonial chains to independence was never a straight path. It stumbled, it fought, it dreamed, and it bled. But through all the noise there was always the pulse of a people who refused to give up, who kept singing their own song even when no one listened. Tonight that song hums softly in your ears like a lullaby carried by the wind. The city you've walked through in memory settles into calm. Brazzaville's lights twinkle like sleepy stars, and the river flows steady as it always has, whispering secrets to the night. You picture the flag still swaying gently in the breeze, and with it the unshakable hope of a nation that, despite every storm, still stands. Let your breathing slow, let your thoughts drift. The sounds of drums, distant laughter, and the hush of the river melt together into something soothing, something that feels like home. The story has ended, but its echoes remain warm and steady in the quiet of your mind. You are safe here, wrapped in history's gentle embrace. Close your eyes, let the past slip away, and rest easy. Sweet dreams.